Hello, Don Sands. Ian here from the Donistat podcast, bringing you another video. Well, we've only just over a week from the national draft. We're very happy with how that went, I imagine, as Essendon fans. But it's never too early to start thinking about the following season and the different things that will start playing out as the season progresses, particularly in terms of contracts and list management. There's obviously a lot to play out over the next 12 months in terms of people playing and how people progress in their development, particularly the younger players. But list managers are always thinking about how to structure their side, which players coming out of contract are going to receive new deals and which will be shown the door. So I thought it'd be an interesting idea to put an early marker in the field about the players that I feel are likely to get a new deal in 2026, those that are coming out of contract, and those that are in a little bit of trouble and might need big years heading into next year. So heading into 2026, Essendon has 18 players out of contract. Of those 18 players, 11 are on the main list, 6 are on the rookie list, and we have Jade, our Cap B rookie. Now, in the Brad Scott era, Essendon have averaged close to 10 list changes each off-season. So there might be other players who are retire or are traded that might contribute to some of those list changes. But you would imagine that many of those list changes, if we continue along that roughly around 10 list changes average, will come from these lists of players here. So again, many of these players will spend their last year at Essendon in 2026. So what I've done is I've gone through and broken things up into 4 different categories and how I rate these players in terms of their ability to get a contract next year. So the first category are my sure things. These are the ones that are almost certain to get a contract and in fact probably expect something early on in 2026. I have my likely players who would have to have something go fairly wrong for them not to get a new contract, whether that's showing no development or they lack focus or dedication to their training. Then you have the players who need a big year. So these are the ones who might have struggled in the last year or been on the list for a little bit of time and haven't quite developed as much as we would have hoped. And so they do need to have a big year to guarantee, if not a 1-year contract, even more years contract. And then finally, we have the players that I think are in trouble who would need really big years and things to change a lot for them to get a contract in 2027. Let's start with our sure things. And my first sure thing, I wouldn't be surprised to most people, would be Angus Clarke. He's probably the safest of all the uncontracted players. He's someone who came into the senior side last year, probably a lot earlier than many people expected, but given the injury crisis, we had to blood the young players. But Angus looked right at home, obviously, from his debut against Richmond, where he kicked 3 goals playing off the wing, but he's also showing quite a lot of maturity across halfback as well. There's been some signs of him moving into the midfield, and I think with the way we've drafted, that might be the way that they're looking for him in the long term, given we've bolstered the defensive line there. I would expect with Angus Clarke for a deal to be inked in the first couple of months, and again, wouldn't be surprised if he's the first to sign in 2026. My next sure thing is Lewis Hayes. Obviously, he's coming off an ACL, but has shown clear progression as a key defender, both in his VFL games and in the AFL time that he did play, however short that it was. He looked quite at home as an AFL player. The only reason I can see Lewis Hayes not being on the list next year is that he feels like he's not going to get a game ahead of Mackay, Reid and Ridley and looks for other opportunities. So, Mackay and Ridley, given apart, if you ignore their injury history, you'd expect them to be performing at a high level for another 3 or 4 years. Reid's obviously coming through as well. Again, all 3 of those players do have injury issues, so you would imagine Hayes could see himself getting game time anyway, but that could be something that he's tempted by. But otherwise, I'm pretty sure Lewis Hayes will get a contract in 2026. My final sure thing is the captain of the Vietnamese team of the century, Jade, another who came in towards the end of last season and showed plenty as a small defender. It's going to probably depend on what Andy McGrath's role is in the side in 2026, whether he sees a lot of AFL game time. But I think being a Cap B rookie, given that there's less competition for those spots, I think it's almost certain that he gets a contract. I think if he was on the main rookie list, he'd be further down this list, but given he's a Cap B rookie and he can be for another couple of years after next year, and the pleasing signs we saw for him at the back end of 2025. Again, I think this is almost another sure thing early early season signing. Moving on to the next category of likely players, and my first one in this category is Kale Ryan. Okay, when you select key tools, particularly early on in the draft, and he was selected in the 30s in the 2024 draft, you're selecting these players because you know they're going to take a bit of time, so you're prepared to give them a bit more leeway in terms of their development. Has some elite traits and could probably play in any third of the ground. Obviously, he was probably drafted mostly as a key forward, played plenty of ruck time in his under 18 years, and from what we're hearing from the training reports, he's spending a fair bit of time down back as well. So there is a bit to work on in terms of his endurance, but I think as long as he shows commitment to his training program and has a good attitude, he'll get another deal. My next likely candidate is Zach Johnson. I think Zach Johnson has become a fan favourite really quickly and has two attributes the club has really lacked. He's got excellent disposal, particularly by foot, and he's also got good leadership. He didn't have much of a preseason last year because of injury, and he still came into the senior side and performed pretty well at times. You did get a sense that he was lacking a bit of run and had some games where he had little impact. But from the little we see, I think there's definitely a play here. So again, if he gets another good preseason, that'll set him up to play a bigger role in the future. I've got him in the likely category as opposed to the sure thing category, just because he is such a late pick. Generally with later picks, the rope that they have is a little bit lesser in terms of patience. But again, I'd be very surprised if Zach Johnson wasn't on the list come 2027. My next one on my list is Archie May. Now, he's another project player. We've really only got Nate Caddy as a long-term key forward at this point in time. With Peter Wright being close to 30, they're probably the only two in terms of the key position stocks that you would be confident could perform for a period of time at AFL level, with Wright approaching 30. We do need to find at least another long-term partner for Nate Caddy. I think May has that potential to be Caddy's partner in crime. He offers a point of difference. Caddy, is much more of a... He's not that tall forward that we might want. He's not the deepest target, which I think May could project to be. I think we've seen signs in his early games of his ability to get up the ground and be a target, which I think is really important in today's game as well. Given he's a mid-season draft pick and being on our crowded rookie list, he cannot rest on his laurels, and he really needs to show improvement throughout 2026 to be guaranteed a list spot. But I think at this stage, he's more likely than not to be on the list in 2027. My final pick for the likely category is Reece Unwin, another one of our 2024 draftees. Again, another one of those players at the end of the season, we got a glimpse in terms of the skills that they have, particularly his evasion skills, his first few steps are really quick, and he's able to break through congestion and break lines that way, which is something Essendon has really lacked. He still does look a fair way off consistent football at this stage, but I think another that just needs to show a good level of development to get another year, particularly due to the lack of long-term small forwards that are currently on the list. In terms of long-term small forwards, it's really Kako. We've obviously brought in Al Ashkar this year. There's a couple of players who are coming up on this list who might not be there post-2026. So I think, again, given his position of need and given his skill set, I think Reece Unwin is a really good chance of getting a contract to go beyond 2026. Moving on to category 3, those who I think need a big year. Firstly, it's Archer Day-Wicks. Again, another who showed a little bit in 2025, given his first year on the list. And again, his kicking and his aggressiveness is something the side surely lacks. So again, when you've got attributes that the team doesn't have a lot of, that generally leads to you getting a contract. I think the concern with Archer is that he dropped off a little bit towards the end of 2025. So he came into the senior side midway through the year, had a taste, went back to the VFL, and his VFL form really tanked at the back end of the first season. He's a rookie. That tends to lead them to have less job security, and we probably need to demonstrate that end of year fade out this season was a one-off to guarantee a contract. Again, with the crowded rookie list, you'd imagine there's a couple that are probably going to lose their spots there, so you don't want to be the one that misses out there, Archer. Moving on to my next one, it is Archie Perkins, very polarising in the Essendon community. I personally am a big believer in Archie. I think he's the sort of player that is going to really excel in a strong team. especially because of his ability to deliver the ball inside 50 and also to be able to hit the scoreboard as sort of a third or fourth tall target, and a really difficult matchup for defences to deal with. I think the main problem for Archie is that given our injuries, given our poor performance, he's had to do a whole heap of different roles. He doesn't get quite the delivery that he needs in order to excel. So it means his deficiencies have shown up more. Again, I think he's the sort of player that if you let go, he would go to a better team and do really well in. So I think it's more likely than not that he gets a new deal given his talent, but it's certainly not a certainty at this stage. You know, he's a sort of player that if he has a really big year, he could get a 3-year deal. A poor season could see him only getting offered 1 year, and he looks for other opportunities at other clubs there. Another top-end pick that needs a big year is Elijah Tsatas, and it's particularly because the 2025 National Draft saw Essendon draft 3 bigger-bodied midfielders right at the top end of that draft, which means there's a lot of pressure on Elijah to step up this year. And I think particularly with what the Essendon regime have shown with the delisting of Ben Hobbs, that they are prepared to let high-end talent go if they don't feel they're going to be long-term players for the club. He's also no guarantee to start as a first-choice mid in round 1. And if he can't cement a place, there's a chance that players like Dyson Sharp or Sullivan Roby could go past him as early as next year. And obviously with list positions at a premium, you wanting to bring in new talent and keep building around the young core that we've started to progress, you really need a big year from Elijah to show that he can be a top-level AFL midfielder. My next one who needs a big year is Lachlan Blackerson. I did consider putting him up in the next category, but again, I think he's going to have opportunity at the start of this year in the ruck, and it'll be good to get a sense of what he's like as a ruckman. I think as Essendon fans, we probably want Nick Bryan to be that number 1 ruck, or would hope that he would become the number 1 ruck. But you do always need backups, and with someone like Vigo still developing, you would want someone like a Blackerson to, at the very least, provide decent level of backup. If he can't do that at AFL level, well, the ruck merry-go-round continues to go on, and there's always players you can find to play in sort of that backup ruck role. His flexibility probably gives him a little bit of an advantage, given he can play back, but he probably still needs to show a fair bit this year, particularly in the ruck, if he wants to guarantee a further contract there. Next one is Nick Cox. My concern with Nick, obviously, is I don't think we've seen a case yet where someone has got to the point where they've gone before a concussion panel twice and been allowed to continue playing football. I might be missing a case there, but you know, he's really in uncharted territory for a player who's gone through the concussion battles that he has. I would say if he can get through the year without any concussion systems, that his talent will get him another year on the list, and the club will recognise that he sort of, you know, last year was a write-off and to give him another opportunity. Based on his history, that is a big if, but it would be a great story if he was able to overcome those issues, though. So I'm backing him in, and I think, again, he's the sort of player that if we're able to get right, he could have a big impact on where Essendon goes into the future. But again, given his history, I think this is why he's in this category. The next player is Saad Al-Houli. He's one of the few players on the list with genuine speed. I think he really struggled to show it consistently at AFL level last year. It was really only his debut game where he came in as the sub, where he really showed that line-breaking speed and ultimately helped us win the game against Port Adelaide. I also think pinging back and forth between the senior and reserve side wasn't a great look for his future prospects, particularly as we had so many injuries as we did. You know, he's got to work on his issues in regard to his positioning, particularly his defensive positioning. He spent a lot of time on the wing, and he kept finding his way out of the side because he couldn't hold the structure and the positions. So again, another one of those players that has attributes that we really, really lack, and would be really beneficial to the team if he was able to fix those deficiencies. But again, he really needs to show a lot in the senior side, or at least show enough that he can be a regular contributor at AFL level. Otherwise, he might find himself without a contract after 2026. My final needs a big year is actually 2 players. It's Liam McMahon and Tom Edwards. I've actually placed these 2 together because I believe they're competing for one spot on the list. I was really touch and go on re-signing Liam McMahon at the end of last year. He seems to be, or the end of last season, he seems to have limitations as a player, but potentially spending time on an AFL list could see him resolve those limitations, such as can he be effective without the ball, or can he be effective when he's not kicking goals? I think that's a real big question for Liam. And Tom obviously showed a bit in the games that he played. The fact that he came into the side so early on after being picked up as an SSP shows that the club really thinks he's got a lot of talent. But again, coming off an ACL injury, he obviously needs to have a strong start. You probably don't expect him to start as strongly as he builds into it, or start in the AFL side. But again, limited spots, particularly on the rookie list. You're going to have to perform well or show enough to be able to keep that. So for me, these two are basically competing for one spot at the end of 2026. So we'll see which one wins out. And then finally, we've got the in troubles. These are the players I think are in real struggle town, unless they have big years. And we have seen players in the past at Essendon have really strong years in their contract years. Looking at you, Jake Stringer. But again, these players need to have, in my view, huge years if they want to see contracts go beyond 2026. The first one is Jade Gresham. He's been really hot and cold in terms of his performances since he came over to Essendon. Again, like I spoke about with Reece Unwin, he plays in an area of the ground that we lack depth in, but he's really struggled to contribute consistently. There's a good chance that, the new midfield draftees might be eased into the side through half forward, which could place Jade's position in jeopardy, considering that Jade does like to play that sort of high half forward role, get up around the midfield. We obviously saw Isaac Kako do that a bit at the end of last season as well, and brought in Hussein Alashka, who could play deep, and that might mean that Jade finds his way out of the side. There have been some suggestions that he does actually have a trigger for a fourth year based on how many games he plays. So it'll be interesting to see how that impacts his selection if that is the case, and how the club is feeling about his position. We might see him get Mitch McGoverned at the back end of the year if he's close to a trigger, but the club wants to keep its options open there. And the final player is Matt Guelfi, another player who's playing that small forward role that we really need to strengthen. When available, he's best. When available, he's shown a bit, particularly in those defensive forward roles. That's really limiting. And given his injury history and his recent injury history and his inability to stay on the field consistently, I think he's again another one that's in real struggle town to be able to be on the list in 2027. Some of the early projections of next year's draft at the top end show some really high level small forwards. And again, if we end up down that area of the ladder and get that sort of access, that top access to the draft, Matt Guelfi could be in trouble, particularly again if he struggles with injury there. So again, he's one I'd see as his final year on the list, unless something extraordinary happens. Well, let me know what you guys think in the comments of this video. Thank you for watching. It's obviously a lot to play out with these list decisions, and I would expect that, if I was to do this exercise in about 6 months' time, that I would have players in different positions. Again, let us know your thoughts. Thanks for all your support, and as always, stay safe and go Dons.